So we will make a start. Lovely to see some familiar names in the chat. Really excellent that so many colleagues have been able to book onto this event. And huge thanks to Family Rights Group for hosting such an important and timely discussion. My name is Des Holmes. I'm the Director of Research and Practice and Strategic Director of Practice and Programmes at the National Children's Bureau. And I'm being allowed to facilitate this event. But all that really means is I'm going to keep people to time. So all of our wonderful speakers with rich expertise, you're going to love them, and I'm going to be the wicked witch that is hard on time. That's my role today. It's a real pleasure. I'm going to hand over almost immediately to Kathy Ashley, who's the Chief Executive of Family Rights Group, and many of you, I'm sure, will know her work. And Kathy's going to give us a little bit of context setting to get us ready to be thinking about family group decision making and what it means for your local authority, given the bill that's coming through. Hi, Kathy.
Good morning. My name's Kathy Ashley and I'm Chief Executive of Family Rights Group. And I'm just going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of the current legal context. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to put up the slides. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of context about the bill that's going through Parliament. So that's the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill. And the sort of precursor to this was the Independent Children's Social Care Review in 2022, which was led by Josh McAllister, and it recommended that family group decision making should be a legal right for families. And then following that, the then Conservative government funded the families. I'm going to get the title wrong, but it's Families First for Children Pathfinders. They funded 10 Family First for Children Pathfinders, which was to test family-led solutions. And they also funded 7 standalone family network pilots, which was testing family network support packages. The evaluations of those Pathfinders and pilots should be out later this year. You then, following that, had general election, and in November, the government published its policy ambitions for children's social care. And the quote that you see there from the Secretary of State for Education, the Right Honourable Bridget Phillipson, was a quote from her in Parliament following that statement as to the ambitions of the Labour government. And it states clearly, all families face challenges at one time or another. I want to help them to come up with their own solutions wherever possible. So we will legislate to embed family group decision making as an offer that all families can access. It is in part 1 of the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, and that was a deliberate decision by the government. And you can see set out here the ambitions that are that the government have stated. It's their language rather than mine, as to what they hope family group decision making will achieve. So it's keeping children safely in their family, ensuring a family network is engaged and empowered through the decision making process, and the potential for kinship carers, that family and friends who may be identified within the family network, to raise a child should they not be able to remain with their parents. So I'm going to ask a colleague to go on to the next slide. I just want to run quickly through the evidence for family group decision making, but just to make clear that in the explanatory notes to the bill, it states family group decision making is an umbrella term to describe family-led meetings that allow a family network to come together and make a plan in response to concerns about a child's safety and well-being. And then it draws on evidence that specifically from family group conferences, which it states is a specific model of family group decision making, as to why they are doing this. So the strong evidence from family group conference is that it diverts children from care. And some of that evidence is gleaned from a randomized control trial of family group conferences by Foundations, which is the What Works Centre for Children's Social Care. I'm not going to go into the numbers because we haven't got time in this whistle-stop tour. But what the evidence from the Foundation's research found was that family group conferences at a pre-proceeding stage led to more children living safely within their families. It led to children spending less time in care who did go into care, as well as averting children going into care. And it led to significant savings for local authorities. And they predicted what could be saved. There is lots of other evidence in relation to family group conferencing or family group conferences, and that includes, for example, the Leeds Family Values research. So that's going to go in the chat. So in terms of the bill itself, what I should make clear is it is going through Parliament at the moment. It's just finished its committee stage. So what's in the bill may change. It will go to report stage in the Commons, and then it will go to the Lords. And ourselves, as well as others, are lobbying for some changes to the family group decision-making provisions in the bill in order to ensure that the principles of family group conferences are embedded in the bill. But I'm going to just explain what's in the bill as is at the moment. And the first thing is it describes a family group decision-making meeting in the way that's set out here. So it's a meeting that enables the child's family network to discuss the welfare needs of the child and to make a plan in response to concerns about the child's welfare. It says, where appropriate, the child may attend the meeting. We at Family Rights Group, in terms of the family group conference approach, would say that children should always be offered the opportunity to participate in their family group conference with all the safety planning around that and support that is necessary. The bill also describes what is a family network. I should make clear that Catherine McKinnell, who was the government minister at a committee stage, responding to questions about the bill, makes clear that there will be statutory guidance that will be published by the government that will set out in more detail what the expectations will be of local authorities in relation to family group decision making. And here it says, she said clearly, the statutory guidance will make clear that local authorities should engage with the full scope of the family network. And that it doesn't just mean blood relatives, that means all who care about the child, all who have a stake in the child's life. In terms of what the bill says, so it's saying that local authorities must offer a family group decision-making meeting before a local authority in England makes a care order application in relation to a child. And so when a local authority sends a letter before proceedings to the child, to the family, then the local authority should ensure that a family group decision-making meeting is offered. There are some exceptions to that. In the slide, you will see that the government minister has made clear that their expectations are that it is not constrained, the office not constrained to pre-proceedings. Local authorities can offer family group decision-making meeting far earlier, but it must offer at the pre-proceeding stage. these are slides you can read later, but these are comments from Ofsted from in the last year, in which they highlight the benefits of offering family group conferences at an earlier stage. And I will ask, given time, to. So I just want to give the context in terms of, you've got the bill going through Parliament. Local authorities have just heard that that the government is awarded 270 million for children's social care prevention grant. Some of that money is explicitly to help deliver the legislative requirements around family group decision making. Each local authority has knows how much it's going to get. And if you don't know in your local authority, then Nicola and Andrew will post a link in the chat. And conscious Des is telling me to wind up in a second. So I just want to state that statutory guidance is going to be crucial. So you need to think about the bill, or what will become an act, and statutory guidance, not just in relation to family group decision making. There's other statutory guidance that will link through, but local authorities should follow statutory guidance unless there are exceptional reasons why not. And the last thing is to say that the Department of Education is saying that it will be commissioning a best practice guide on family group decision making. So that's my whistle stop tour, and I'm now going to hand over to Paul Nixon, who is in South Australia, so very privileged to have him with us. And Paul is formerly chief social worker in New Zealand, but has had many other senior roles as well. Over to Paul.
Kia ora, Kathy, thank you so much. Ninamani, greetings in the language of the Kaurna people in Adelaide, South Australia. Mani ngā putni, it's good you've come. Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Greetings all from Aotearoa, New Zealand as well, where FGC started in law in 1989. I'm just delighted to be with you. Just got a few messages about FGCs and things to think about in this conversation this morning. Sorry, I can't stay with you for the whole time because it's 8:30 in the evening and in Adelaide, and I've been working all day, so I need to knock off at some point, but I hope the meeting and the conference goes really well. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Why does family group conferences matter? Why is there so much international interest in this way of working? Well, what we're seeing around the world is a really powerful effect on rethinking partnership with families, rethinking how we connect and work with families, and fundamentally changing the way we make decisions in order to change the outcomes. If we change the way we do things fundamentally, then we will change the outcomes. Our law and policy around the world sets an agenda for partnership, but doesn't really articulate strongly what that should look like. And that's why FGDM is so important, because it really does give us a format and a method for partnership with family and with community. In true partnerships, we change each other. In true partnerships, we influence each other and change because of our partners. So one of the really interesting thing about FGDM is it makes professionals change their behavior in how they connect with and how they work with families. I'll give you a very quick example of that. There was a conference done recently here in South Australia. An Aboriginal family asked for a conference standing in a river. Because if you live up in the desert in the APY lands, and you want to stand in one place for any period of time, you need to stand in the water, which meant the social workers and the health workers who came to the conference literally had to take their pants off, not their underpants, but their pants, to get in the water and stand with the family and talk about how they're going to support each other and keep the children safe. So it makes us change our behavior. Child wellbeing bill is really exciting to me to see, after all the work that FRG have led and all the work that's been done. It's finally coming into our law, and I think it's a really powerful message to people about how we need to change our practice and the way we make decisions. If you look at the evidence internationally on the numbers of children in care, there's a very strong pattern. Most jurisdictions and countries land somewhere between 75 and 85 children in care per 10,000. England's currently at 70. But New Zealand's at 40 per per 10,000, has been for some time. And the reason for that is it has family group conferences in its law. And I know you'll probably know that and have heard about that, but since the Act, New Zealand's done 250,000 FGCs. And because that really changes the way decisions are made, it does change the outcomes for children, which is evident in the data. So I calculated if England was going to do FGCs at the same level, we should be doing about 100,000 FGCs a year in England. And wouldn't it be fantastic if this law opened the door to that, as really partnering differently with families and changing outcomes in the ways that we work? So England, as Andrew's saying, is 70 children in care per 10,000. New Zealand's 40 per 10,000. FGCs in New Zealand haven't changed since the Act. There's been numerous organizational structures, new laws, new leadership, but FGCs have endured. And we do 10,000 FGCs in New Zealand per year, which means that for every 4 social workers, we have 1 full-time coordinator. So imagine that if you had a team of 8 social workers in a team, you'd have 2 full-time coordinators working with them, going to find family, bringing family together. Now, just recently here in South Australia, they're in the business of putting FGCs in law as mandatory. The same conversations that are happening in England are happening in South Australia, and that's why I'm down here at the moment, to help with that. And there's a couple of big issues around it. One is clearly defining what an FGC is so that the process is practiced well with integrity, and the elements of the FGC that genuinely share power with families are retained and strengthened in the law. So that happens in practice. And secondly, being very specific about when one must refer for an FGC, when you would call an FGC and why that matters. South Australia has just published its own research on FGCs, which matches the same methods, the same outcomes and messages in England. So what we know from the South Australian research, and I'll send it to Kathy so she can post it on the website because it is publicly available now, is children participate more in FGCs. Children who have an FGC are less likely to experience future harm than children who have just an orthodox child protection response. That children are less likely to go into care. And that really interestingly, the outcomes in FGCs were the same for Aboriginal children as non-Aboriginal children, which is a really striking finding because there's such deep inequalities for Aboriginal children in Australia because of problems around institutional racism and a lack of understanding of the culture of Aboriginal people and the lack of services for Aboriginal families. So it really has changed the outcome for Aboriginal children, which is very significant. FGCs invite us to rethink how we share power and risk with families, how we move power back to families. Why wouldn't we involve the family? If we're trying to keep a child safe, if we're trying to organize a care placement for them, children's most reliable, enduring, and loving relationships come from family. Why wouldn't we seek to offer this to every child where there's important decisions made about their lives? Our involvement in the lives of children as social workers or clinicians or counselors is only ever temporary. The family's commitment to children is permanent. It doesn't go away, it endures, as does those relationships, as does the love they offer them. So thinking about the context in New Zealand, we talk about 3 types of mandate: a legal mandate, which requires people to make a referral for an FGC at critical points where the social worker must make that referral. A policy mandate where we articulate other places conferences can be used really clearly and agencies drive that use of FGC, and a good practice mandate, which is conferences are developed as a good practice model. So I think knowing when to refer and knowing what the key elements of FGCs are really important in terms of making this process work well. I know Sean's going to talk about some of the key elements of the FGC process. We know this process has been well tested over many years. It's been well researched and the message is the same about the research outcomes. So I think it's really important in our practice and our policy we retain the integrity and the fidelity of the FGC process. If we don't define those things clearly at a local level, the risk is that it'll start to fray at the edges and people will start doing family decision making, which looks more like at the convenience of agencies or professionals rather than really holding on to those things that shift power back to families and redefine partnerships with families. The other thing that's really interesting me about in New Zealand is that if you have an FGC and it doesn't make a successful plan, very often the court will say, go back and try again. Go back and try again, have another conference. And I'm really curious to see what the courts in England do in relation to this mandated offer. Do they have high expectations about conferences happening in England to a high quality standard, reflecting the core elements of this work, and then not accepting applications unless that has happened? So I think it's really important that at a local level, there's a strong leadership of what the practice should look like, and what is the culture that we need to build the right environment for social workers and other agencies to work in true partnerships with families. The last thought I'm going to leave you with is really about, what if we don't refer? What if there's too much freedom and flexibility in the implementation of this? And what would we say to a young person who maybe 10 years from now comes up to us in the street and says, I remember you, you were my social worker. So, oh yeah, how you getting on? Oh, well, not so good. I'm sort of homeless, a bit isolated and out of work. But I do have a question for you. Why didn't you refer me for a family group conference before you took me into care? What would we say to them? How would we justify not making that available to them when we know this really is an effective way of keeping children in their family and their community? So I'm really excited about what's happening in England. Really delighted to be here, and I wish you well for your conference today. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thank you.
Just introduce myself. I'm Sean Hurston. I'm practice lead for family group conferencing and lifelong links at the Family Rights Group. So we've heard about family group decision making as an umbrella term for different methods of engaging families in decisions about their children. So what does good family group decision making look like? Well, as we've said, at Family Rights Group, we believe that family group conferences are the gold standard of FGDM. So why is that? Well, FGC is a defined process with a clear practice framework, which is researched and evaluated, as Kathy has outlined. Alternative models of engagement with families may be strength-based, but are not clearly defined and lack a really coherent practice framework. With FGCs, families are themselves the lead decision makers when addressing concerns about their children's welfare. It's perhaps best to think about the different approaches of family group decision making within a continuum of family engagement. And we would see FGCs as being to the right of this continuum, with families as the lead decision makers. So why are family group conferences the best approach? Well, first and foremost, it's important to say that agreement to participate in an FGC is a voluntary decision. Families have got unique knowledge about themselves and a common interest in their children's future, as Paul has just mentioned as well. But bringing families together when the stakes are so high is complex and needs a really carefully thought out, tried and tested approach. And we believe that that's family group conferencing. There are fundamental ingredients in family group conference practice that underpin the family-led nature of FGCs. These are the independence of the coordinator, the degree of planning and preparation with the wider family, and the structure of the meeting that includes private family time, that privileges private discussion time for the family. So I'm just going to say a little bit about those different elements. So firstly, about independence. I want to emphasize that the family group conference coordinator role is an independent role in that they don't have any other decision-making responsibilities in relation to the child or their family. Their sole responsibility is to facilitate family group conference process, and then an independent coordinator in that role can act as a trusted person, a bridge between family members themselves and between the family and the state. Convening a group of family members needs careful preparation to hear the different perspectives, to manage risk, and allow all to come together at the family group conference ready to make a plan. So in contrast to other family engagement approaches that will usually be professionally led, that independent role, I think, is really, really key. Thinking about the second issue, preparation. So most family group conference services will work to a time frame for the delivery of the family group conference from around 6 to 8 weeks, from referral through to family group conference meeting. However, I think it's important to emphasize that this is flexible and needs to always work at the pace of the family. The coordinator needs to resist pressure to undercut the time frame, as we know that can then undermine the effectiveness of the family group conference. So why is preparation important? Well, it's important for a number of reasons. One, in relation to the child's participation. You need time to engage the child, explore their views, and think about how best they can be represented within the family group conference. And that's often with the support of an independent advocate who will meet with the child and then will attend the FGC with the child as well. Secondly, thinking about safety and planning for any risks. So families may be experiencing high degrees of conflict. There may be concerns about the behavior of individuals within the family. There may be very vulnerable family members. So it's important that you have the opportunity to meet with all the family network together individually and to explore concerns. That is really, really crucial that the process is safe, to enable the process to be safe for all when people come together. And thirdly, about the ensuring that the family have all the information that they need. We know that as you move away from the primary carers of children, the wider family may not be familiar with what's happening and the views of children's services. So the coordinator acts to ensure that all of the family have all the information that they need that is understandable and also reflects their views as well. So these issues are crucial to the success of the FGC. And other strengths-based approaches that we don't think have got a defined practice protocol for how families will be properly prepared and engaged with to come together in a meeting. Thinking about the FGC itself, so the family group conference itself is planned so as to be informal and family-led. There will usually be food provided and, where needed, a creche and other supports for the family to participate. So the German academic Professor Frank Fruchtel, he uses a football analogy, referring to the family group conference as a home game. A professionally led meeting, such as the Child Protection Conference, will be seen as an away game. Now, granted, you may say that the home game may be against the mighty Liverpool, but in response, I would have to say Plymouth Argyle, because sorry for those of you unfamiliar with football, but League One Plymouth beat Premiership Liverpool last weekend. So, moving on quickly, so there are 3 stages to the family group conference, as people will know. First stage is the information giving stage. This is intended to ensure that all the relevant information, as I've said, is on the table in order for the family to make a plan. The second part of the family group conference, the bit that is unique to the process, is private family time. And that's exactly what it is. It's a time for the family to have privileged time to come together, to have an open and tough conversation and to make a plan without professionals or the coordinator being present. And finally, the third stage, agreeing the plan, involves a coordinator bringing the family and professionals back together, and the family are then able to present their plan and hopefully for this to be agreed, including how it will be monitored and taken forward. So family group decision making must be done right, so the process is truly child-centered, family-led and safe. And this matters because the quality of the process impacts the strength of the outcome for the child, for the family, and for wider society as well. In order to kind of embed those principles, Family Rights Group was funded by the government to establish a clear standards framework for FGC practice, probably about 12 years ago now. So we worked with FGC service and family members to develop a set of standards, and that framework covers measures including independence, consent, that the process is family-led, that it's child-focused, that it's properly resourced, confidential, and culturally sensitive. So services are able to submit evidence against these measures to our accreditation process, which is then reviewed by a panel of peers, and the service receives accredited status for a period of 3 years. So I'm now going to hand over to Tendai, but we'll be happy to answer any questions later.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see everyone bright and early this morning. I am really passionate about Family Group Conference. I think when I first went to my last local authority, and I can see colleagues from there on the call. Hello, nice to see you again. And the Family Group Conference service then was really quite small. I think, you know, we had a part-time manager and a group of coordinators who were providing Family Group Conference. So it was really young, but really passionate people there as well. And a few months into managing the service, attended an event in Leeds where parents and extended family that had been involved in FGC were just talking about their experiences and how valuable it had been. And they were really passionate about the impact that it had had on them, particularly giving them that opportunity really early on to think about how they can support their family, how they can come up with solutions. And they were so passionate about it that I was really inspired. I thought this is really great to be able to see families feel that they owned a process, they owned the decision about where their children were going to be and what was going to happen to them. They spoke about the value of the independent coordinator and how much that gave them the power to feel like they are not being done to by the local authority. They spoke about their private time to really think about what they wanted to do. And more importantly, they spoke about the plan that was produced and how it was valued and how it resulted in their children not going into care and some really important decisions that they made, which really, when I came back from that, I was quite inspired to think about how we can use family group conference in all spheres and all areas of a child's journey. Up until that time, we were mainly using family group conference to support children who are in pre-proceedings, so to speak, or as part of the journey and process for court. But thinking about that, I came away thinking we need to use it more at every point, be it early help, be it in child protection, and at every process. And part of that thinking was also about how we support families to feel empowered in the child protection process. You know how much families always talk about how the power imbalance in child protection conferences and so forth, and being able to center the family's plan within a child protection conference became one of the things that we were really passionate about, having that plan already by the time you get there. What is most important to think about is the fact that many of the families that we work with are quite isolated. Even when you start to think about family group conference, many families will say, I've got nobody. But that is often a result of the shame and the self-blame that families are feeling when they're going through the process. And I know that, when we do get to engage the extended family, we always get the response where they say, we wish we had known this at the beginning. And we always discover more and more family, which sometimes is not immediately clear. And then, the question about who is family as well, which is really important. And in family group conference, that open question about who is family is something that is important to think about. I think one of the things that really I think about in practice is the fact that having an approach like family group conference in your local authority is an indication of how much you value families. It's about how much you think that families have got the solution to what they need. Many of the families we're involved with are in the lower socioeconomic background. It's easy for middle class and other practitioners who've not grown up in that environment to really think that people are in this situation because they want to be, or because they are lesser. And so being able to really take that step back and say, actually, who is the expert here about their life, and who's got the solutions that are going to be more long lasting. It's important to think about that. And a family group conference and the family plan is really something that's going to be there even as you exit a family's life. So I always find that I found that really important, and I always find that really an important thought. Part of the evidence that has been articulated earlier on, about reduction in numbers of children looked after, and reduction in children in subject to child protection plan, I think most services who have a really embedded value system around family and family group conference as well will attest that they've seen those. I've certainly seen them in the previous local authority I spoke about, but also in my current local authority. When I joined my current local authority, we also had a very small family group conference service. We had commissioned it previously. So one of the things I would advise is that the method with which you have a family group conference service or family group decision making is also important to think about, because that also determines the value and what you're going to get out of it. But we had commissioned it out, and we brought it in-house, and as we have scaled it up and thought about ensuring that there's family group conference in early help and through the child protection system and through the pre-proceedings process, you can see the rapid change and the rapid move, not only in our values and how we think, but also in those key indicators that are highlighted within the research. Now, one of the things that somebody would say is really, are those changes you're talking about FGC, or is it about something else? And I would say, yes, it is about FGC, but it is also about everything else. It's about the value system that you have, and that believing in the value of family and believing that children are best raised within their family and that the family has got solutions is part of a whole relationship-based value system that needs to be throughout the whole organization. Obviously, having an embedded family group conference service helps to start those ripple effects if they were not there already, or strengthen them if they already were. And it's about what you believe throughout your organization and throughout the local authority in terms of the value of family and family decision making. What I have seen again and again is that if you really believe that, you will change the way you work. And so we have, quite recently as well, started to have, somebody conducting the family in the assessment stage to whenever it's suitable to offer an FGC, which is even earlier than is indicated in the proposed legislation. So really important to think about not just the values that you hold and what those are going to do, but also to think about the delivery method and how it's going to be delivered and how embedded it is throughout the system, and also to think about, if you're going to have family group conference rather than other methods of family decision making, the various value bases and the processes that is offered, which gives consistency throughout the local authority and throughout each FGC, are really important. But also it's that real question about how involved are family and families in other parts of your system. Certainly in Southwark, where I am now, we have a really robust voice of families. We've even introduced peer family advocates in other aspects, in child protection and other aspects of our delivery. We've got family and family councils and family peer advocates providing support to senior leaders in decision making. We have a whole group of young people and parents who are in an innovation space where they are suggesting changes and to the local authority about various ways we work, because that's important. That's key to have those values, whether it's in practice or in how we deliver, strategically how we deliver services as a whole. So that is my experience of a family group conference and having a family group conference or family-led value within a local authority system. I'll just send you back to the next speaker.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tendai. That was really, really rich. And you provoked all sorts of questions in the chat. So thank you as well for that. I think it's just brilliant that we get to, what a fabulous space to be in, where we can hear international evidence, we can hear really expert policy analysis, we can remind ourselves of the model, and we can hear people's practice experience in multiple local authorities of trying to make this work. What a rich conversation. Thank you very much indeed to colleagues who've contributed so far.
Everyone's just going to take over now, just very briefly. This is consider this your 2-minute warning for the question and answer session. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, then please put them in the chat, and we'll get them in about 2 minutes. My name's Lucy Hutchinson. I'm the head of the Lifelong Links and FGC Family Group Conference Programme here at Family Rights Group. So yeah, just really quickly, just want to say that I think this has maybe all been felt a little overwhelming today, but hopefully also exciting too. For those of you who have worked in FGCs for years now, not all of this will be new to you, and I've already seen a lot of you echoing what's been said by the speakers in the comments. But this is quite a big moment, and recognises the importance of the work that you've been doing for years, and now it looks like it's going to be recognised with the bill that's going through Parliament. So if you would actually like to help us and contribute to some of the information work that we're still doing, then please get in touch, because we'd really value that support. And then for those of you who are from local authorities without an FGDM or FGC service, then the prospect of starting something from scratch can be, I think it's fair to say, daunting, to say the least. But either way, I think the potential of this means a lot of work ahead for all of you working in local authorities. But ultimately, it will benefit the families that you work with, and families like Lorna and so many others that a lot of the speakers have touched on. So Family Rights Group, we are here to help you. That's one of the purposes of this webinar, is to try and explain the context of what's going on, the passage of the bill, what that will mean, but then also like how we can help to help you kind of through this process and what this new landscape will look like. So we provide FGC training, we have bespoke consultancy support to help you set up or to extend or expand your FGC service. And then we also facilitate the FGC network. And if you aren't a member of it, I would really encourage joining. I think we've got about 75 local authorities are members, and there is so much experience and knowledge and support in that group of people. And I think it's fair to say they are an incredibly generous group of people who are really willing to share and help and kind of give advice of their experience. So if you are unsure about the next steps, I would say just get in touch with us. So either Andrew or Nicola, who are part of our FGC and Lifelong Links team here at Family Rights Group, we're going to pop an email address in the chat. We will be circulating information after the webinar that is more specific, gives a bit more detail. Ultimately, just drop us a line, let us know where you need help, how you need help, and we'll do everything we can to support you through this exciting kind of future that lies ahead. So that was your 2 minutes to get your questions into the chat box. So I'm going to hand over to Des, who's going to kind of facilitate the questions section. So thanks, Des.
Thank you very much indeed. Really important to be reminded of the invaluable support that Family Rights Group offer in this space. I mean, I'm excited about the bill and the opportunities, but my goodness, I'd be terrified if we didn't have FRG in the sector helping us understand. So we've got a few questions in the chat that have been helpfully grouped together. Thank you so much to colleagues who've submitted them. Now, there's a few, I'm going to take a few at a time, if I may, and I want to invite colleagues on the call. If you have an answer to this question, post it in the chat, please. We know it's not only that expertise sits in amongst our panel, it's very much the spirit of family group decision making, eh? Everybody in. So a cluster of questions that are really around kind of practice and practice intention. So there's a question around difference between family network meetings and family group conferencing, and is FGD the umbrella term? So there's a point about language, naming, terminology that you might want to get into there. My personal non-expert view is we wouldn't want to just use a big broad term that could capture everything, including very poor practice. nor do we want things that are not FGCs being called FGCs. There's a sort of landing strip to hit there that I'll give panelists a moment to think about. And then a question about if a person's not an FGC accredited coordinator, but may well be taking on a role which is around coordination and practice leadership in family group decision making, are there any proposals locally or within FRG to give advice on the skills, expertise, knowledge that person, almost like a role descriptor? What will be there to help people who haven't come through the route of FGC coordinator accreditation? So 2 questions there. Rose by any other name, and how we help the people doing this kind of work. Who will I come to first? Pam, is it you gearing up here?
Yeah, and Tendo might want to jump in as well, but actually I start with the first question. So we are very aware at Family Rights Group about the different terminology that is around nationally and in different local authorities. So I think from our perspective, FGDM, as Kathy said, is an umbrella term. There's no definition of FGDM. Although in the bill, what the government said in its policy paper from November is that FGDM is family-led meetings. The only model that I know about that's got a set of practice standards and an accreditation framework is Family Group Conference. So that is the model that we are lobbying. And again, there's opportunity still. So as Kathy said, it's gone through committee stage. There is still time to influence what goes into guidance. The guidance, as far as we know, has not been written yet, and the practice guide. So that's our position. We know that Family Group Conference is well researched internationally. It's tried and tested, and is a good model of family group decision making, and it is family led. So that's our position. So I think that there's been some confusion and from speaking to local authorities and to speaking to families who are invited to go to a family network meeting and not quite sure what that means, and sort of picking out where you need to have an independent coordinator, but without the rest of the process, because as Sean said, Family Group Conference is a process. It's not just a meeting where you bring a family network together. So yeah, so I think that's our position in terms of the terminology. I hope that's clear.
Really helpful, and I'm seeing your fellow panelists nod, so I won't be taking heckles at this time. And what about this issue, and Tendo, you might want to come in particularly on this. What kind of support or advice or role descriptors, things like might need to be available to help people do this role if it is less tightly sort of defined and branded, for want of a better word?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a set of standards, certainly. And I think that's the starting point. The skill sets, we know that most people who work with children and families, tend to have the skill set to work with families and so forth. But I think the standards, are really important because they give that consistency, and they also give the everybody, including the family, what to expect in the process. It's easy for a meeting to become quite routine, to be like any other meeting, to be like a co-group meeting or any other meeting. What makes the difference is that it needs to be family-led, and the plan coming from it, for it to come from the family. And so I think the skill set and so forth are things that we can be negotiated and worked on, but the standards as to what are the must-haves for this to be really an effective family-led meeting, I think that's the most important part.
And I guess that absolutely plays out then into role descriptors and essential skills and expertise for those who are in a coordination and facilitation role. Sean, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, just to add briefly, really, that with our accreditation process, we've done a lot of work on our expectations around support for practice within FGC services. So things like supervision, observed practice, access to policy, all of those things. So there are kind of clear sets of expectations within the accreditation framework about how that is evidenced. And in our support for services, and what we would be saying about setting up services, we would be always referencing the standards framework and those kind of issues as part of our support. But at the moment, accreditation, obviously, it's a voluntary thing for services. But even if a service is not immediately looking for accreditation, starting from the premise of the standards framework and how they can plan their service in a way that adheres to that framework is the right approach, I think, which includes things like training and support for FGC coordinators as well.
Thank you. Pam, final word on this?
Yeah, really quickly. I mean, just to say that I think what we hear from families through our national advice service as well is that there's often confusion about what process. There's lots of different meetings with different names and different practice frameworks, and just having that kind of transparency for families when they're invited to a meeting to know what to expect, how it's going to be run, and just information about the meeting. And just to add that, I think the focus on FGC being a process with preparation time means that kind of consideration around any safety planning for the child and any other adults that are going to be at the meeting is there's time for that, and you're not quickly bringing a network of people together where there could be safeguarding concerns.
Yeah, it's really striking me, colleagues, that advocates of FGC, there's a delicate line to walk here. I'll speak only for myself. I personally never believe it's right for national government to dictate the minutiae of operational practice in local areas. And it's really important, actually, just thinking about something that's coming in the chat there, it's really important that in our enthusiasm and advocacy for the best evidenced approaches, we don't squeeze out space for debate and discussion and reflection. I'm hearing a real balancing act that you're striking very well. We mustn't be perceived as so purist as to lack pragmatism. And there is a knife edge there, isn't there? People who are really passionate and skilled and hold a lot of expertise in family group conferencing, rightly, will be arguing very clearly for that and for those principles to be held dear, which is, in my view, entirely sensible. And we don't want to create a sort of narrative where FGC is so boutique it can never be seen as business as usual. So this is really complex, sophisticated thinking that you're needing to do. Can I ask a particular sort of special interest question that I saw come up that I thought was interesting? Any advice or information around the use of family group conferencing, or indeed family group decision making in the broader sense, or family-led decision making, in relation to colleagues referred to migrant families, for example, and whether there was something you could offer there?
I can come in on that one. I think with FGCs, I mean, one of the elements of family group conferencing that is important is that the coordinator will go the extra mile to engage families. So we'll travel, we'll ensure that they visit that wider family network. And I mean, I can think the very first FGC I did was with a family with a drug-using mum who had an AIDS diagnosis and whose family was in Ireland. I went to Ireland and met all of the family in Dublin, and in the end we did the family group conference in Dublin because that made more sense. So there's lots of examples of coordinators going that extra mile, and that really demonstrates to the family the importance that the process places on that wider family engagement. I mean, where it isn't feasible, then I think certainly since, I think Andrew put this in the chat, since COVID, there's been a huge sort of development of using technology to engage and bring families into the room as well. And that may be a means of achieving wider family participation where families live in other countries, and that happens as well. And then I suppose thirdly, what I'd say is that we have the FGC network, and we're part of the European FGC network, and we do get lots of inquiries that we're then able to engage with FGC services in other countries as well. They may then contribute work towards bringing families together one way or another through the FGC as well.
I'll just leave space, thank you, Sean, in case any. Tendai, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, I think it's there's always challenges with anything you're doing, and there are many challenges with FGC too, particularly in this circumstance of migrant families. and families who may be overseas or other, there are things to think about in terms of visas and ability to come into the UK. There's stuff to think about their immigration status and how that might be impacted or otherwise. So there are those considerations. And they are a group of young people that, unaccompanied young people as well, where you might think that an FGC may or may not work, but there's also lots of evidence of that. Family group conference coordinators going the extra mile and facilitating those things to happen as well. So it's when you engage with others and other local authorities and other family group conference coordinators, there's a good sharing of knowledge, which could help to overcome some things. But of course, sometimes it doesn't. The conversion rates differ across different groups of young people or circumstances.
Thank you. And on a conceptual level, really struck by Paul's emphasis that this is about seeding power, sharing power, locating power where it is most useful. I absolutely see a connection between the disempowered experiences of many migrant families and the helpfully subversive dynamic of FGC in that context. We might be sticking with you here, Tendai. There's a couple of questions around sort of where in the journey FGC can be used. So someone's asking, is self-referral for family group conferencing possible? A couple of colleagues asking about use of family group decision-making within early help or much, much earlier in a child and family's sort of journey, and any research on how, this might be one for you, FRG, any research on how effective it is when used much earlier than, for example, pre-care proceedings. Any views on that, Tendai, around using it much earlier, self-referral, that kind of early help bit?
Yeah, I mean, self-referral is ideal. After all, you want the family to want this, to want to provide solutions, but also important to offer that to families. In an ideal world, when the money is there in the local authority, it would be great if this is offered to every family before you proceed to really difficult decisions about families. But so it's quite normal for people to self-refer, but sometimes it depends on how you've set up your FGC service. So it's important to think about that as you set up your FGC service, whether or not you're going to create that opportunity for people to self-refer. In terms of whether to have FGC in early help, and I mean, you can have them at any point. You can have the full FGC at any point and follow, the processes. It doesn't stop you from what other people were describing, which is in an emergency, you need the family to come together and quickly come up with a plan or whatever. You're not prevented, I think, from, normal social work, if you like, in terms of those processes about, but, having a family group conference at any point in the journey is possible, whether it's early help or it's in assessment stage. It's all about whether you've got enough time to do it, in its full.
Well, yeah. If I may, Pam and Sean, I'm going to move us on, unless you really wanted to come in on that point, because there's a really, really interesting aspect being picked up in the chat that I want us to respond to. When Lorna and Pam were speaking, Lorna referenced the social worker not being involved in the meeting, although being very supportive of the plan and included in that way, but not in the room, so to speak. And while some colleagues have a similar experience, I'm also seeing really interesting discussions in the chat about, well, how do you then hold the safety plan? How would that feel for the social worker? How do we manage that? And I absolutely understand that family-led decision-making is about dialogue, not division. So any tips and tricks and thoughts around how you avoid there any kind of exclusion of social workers or overlooking of safety? How do you create this really integrated approach with different models of social workers being present or not present? And that's to any of the three of you. Is that nominate Hair Snape? Okay, go for it, Sean.
Okay. I think, as I was saying when I did my little bit of the presentation about the importance of preparation, the importance of being able to have the time to meet with everybody, to explore people's participation, to kind of get a sense of the worries and anxieties that people have coming together. In my experience as a coordinator, in terms of managing risk, most of the information you'll get about how you manage that will be from the family itself. the concerns and anxieties, and thinking about that and how you respond to that, thinking about ground rules, thinking about how will you cope if it feels like the temperature is rising within the discussion. What do you want me to do? So I think that having that time to prepare, thinking about support for vulnerable people within the room, thinking about anxieties and how you plan for that is for me emphasize the importance of having enough time to do the preparation work with the family and being really, really clear about how you're going to be able to manage on the day. And in my experience, that, you know, I've not had a situation where things have not worked okay on the day. So and if that is the case, you can always stop the meeting, you can always pause things. You know, it's a very flexible and informal process. But the social worker, although the social worker won't be in the room during the private part of the discussion, you are very close to what's going on and you're available, and you know, you're kind of monitoring the sort of sense of how things are progressing as well.
That's really important, not just in terms of the practices and the methods, but actually the tone. I don't hear anything in what you're saying or what others are saying that is about excluding social workers, disempowering social workers to fulfill their duties, to exercise their skills and wisdom.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
This is when you talked to Ten about the sort of the mindset, really. It's not a meeting, it's a mindset. It's a way you think about the work we do and the expertise that we need to respect. We don't not respect social workers' expertise and input because we're respecting families. Respect is not pie. We don't have to, you know, slice it up that way. So that's just, I thought, something worth clarifying. Anything you'd want to add there, Tendai, before I start talking about money?
Yeah, it's not an either or. I think the social worker is a key part of the FGC process, from sharing what their concern is to providing the information to the family to be able to make the to make their plans, and to also, you know, having a look at and supporting the, you know, I've seen in the chat about risk assessment and so forth. Yes, sometimes the people that are suggested or the plan that is suggested, there's some you know, some issues to check out and afterwards, but if that partnership with the family is really important, because it allows you to have a plan that can really work and move forward. If the social worker is completely excluded from the whole process, then that doesn't really help to get a plan that can get you through court or anything. So it's a really core part. You know, the social work is a core part of this.
So important to clarify that. I really appreciate it. And I'll just flag, folks, lots of really interesting answers coming through in the chat now about how people use FGC or FGDM more widely in early help, earlier in the process, how social workers are included or involved or given input. So it's a network exchange of knowledge. It's not the panel only giving answers. So do keep an eye on that. Really, really swiftly, a couple of points that I think are important to raise, and they're kind of connected, actually. What does this sort of government funding announcement mean for local authorities with existing FGC services or lifelong links, for example, which is again conceptually very, very connected? And sort of linked to that, really, whilst we're thinking about money, there will be, I'm certain, because local authorities are under such, in my view, indefensible resource pressures, there will be local authorities, for entirely understandable reasons, looking at ways to cut costs, dilute provision, and so on and so forth. What's helpful in terms of making the economic case? Because we can all make the ethical case, the moral arguments are clear if you get it, but where's the money argument here, and what can people do? And the answer might be read all our links, which is okay if that's the answer.
Just, I'll say quickly,
Okay.
in terms of the economic argument, I think the evidence is very strong about potential savings through FGCs. I mean, the Foundation's research estimated that over a period of 2 years, there would be a saving of 150 million. The Leeds Family Valued research estimated that for every pound spent on FGCs, there was 19 pounds saved. So just on those two measures, the economic argument was very clear. We know about the costs of children coming into the care system, and the impact of that on local authority resources is absolutely huge. So, and the evidence says that FGC can prevent children from entering the care system.
Yeah. So if I may say this, we already have a family group conference service. I think part of the thinking is then to think about, if we already have it for the areas that are being legislated, does the extra money give us the opportunity to explore all the other areas that we have not considered it before, or even, you know, funding other aspects of promoting family valued approaches. So yeah, that's what we are going through right now, just trying to think, you know, although we have core funding for our FGC service, do we want to scale it up? Do we want to look at other areas where it could be of value?
So if you are already, you know, exercising really evidence-based approaches, and as we've discussed, as it stands, FGC is the strongest evidence-based approach within family-led and family group decision-making, then this funding should help you to progress it further, accelerate it, expand it. If you are not yet doing it, hopefully this funding makes a real difference and gives you a bit of that boost that you'll need to embed this. I'm going to need to wrap up at this point. Some of the things that have struck me from a very non-expert angle is that it's not a meeting, it's a mindset. This is about, yes, it's about value for money, and we will be sharing those links, but it's about your values full stop. It's about what you believe it is to serve people and to be in service to families and communities. And I think that's a really important part to hold on to. I'm really, really enjoying the intellectual stretch of, we're not trying to be purist, we're not trying to be impractical, we're not trying to be boutique, but we are trying to say, we've got a chance here to do the things that seem to work best. And this bill, the intent of the bill, to really, really embed a sense of family-led decision-making, family power, family rights, to make that intent a reality, why wouldn't we give ourselves the best shot of doing what works best? I'm really grateful to colleagues who have spoken to and shared their wisdom and expertise. You will receive the slides. You may well be getting the recording afterwards. I know that we have been recording. Can I get a nod? Yes, you will be getting the recording afterwards. Thank you for confirming. Do go through the chat and check everybody else's answers. It's been really interactive, and just a joy to see people's expertise and wisdom coming through. I really am grateful to Family Rights Group for leading this conversation. There's a lot of noise in the system, a lot of policy changes, a lot of clauses in the bill. To have sharp-eyed focus on the bits that really matter to our values is fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great to be part of it. Thank you for letting me be involved. I'm sorry we're 1 minute over. Enjoy the rest of your week. We are only a day and a bit away from the weekend. Thank you again so much to everyone who spoke. Take care.